Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
The definition of transformation has evolved and mutated into a core aspect to achieve success. And today, transformation, simply put, is the holistic and rigorous effort that helps an entire company achieve its potential. Transformation Realized, powered by EY, is a brand new chapter where we bring to you inspiring stories of business transformation that have put human technology and innovation at the core. In the third episode of this series, we explore the transformation journey of a wellness company that flourished during the COVID-19 pandemic, growing its outlet coverage by 1.5 times to 5.5 lakh outlets by the end of 2022.
In a world of unprecedented disruption and market turbulence, transformation today revolves around the need to generate new value, to unlock new opportunities, drive new growth, and to deliver new efficiencies. Business transformation is a key building block towards growth. Strategy, innovation, and tech evolution are playing a critical role in driving success and leveraging the emerging trends to achieve scale and long-term growth. This week on the 6-part series of Transformation Realized, powered by EY, we bring to you the story of Zydus Wellness, a leading consumer wellness company with an Indian heritage and a global footprint, its strategy of acquiring Heinz India's consumer wellness business, which includes popular brands such as Complan and Glucon-D, and its transformation journey. To talk more about this, let me welcome Tarun Arora, the CEO of Zydus Wellness, and Nishit Bhatia, Partner, Business Consulting and Consumer Products Leader at EY India. Tarun and Nishit, thank you very much for taking time out and speaking to us today. Tarun, let me start with you. You joined Zydus Wellness in about 2014-15, and at that time, what was the size of the company? Some 400-500 crores. So in the span of years since, a lot has changed when it comes to the business landscape and the financials. So take us through the journey of Zydus Wellness in these years.
Yes, I joined the organization in 2015, and that point of time, the company was about 400 crores. And last financial year, we've closed at about close to 2,000 crores. So we've had a 5x growth journey, which is a mix of several things that we've seen on the way, which is reviving growth organically on the business around our key brands that we had at that point of time, which were market leaders, sugar-free, Everyuth, Nutralite. And we've also had, the Kraft Heinz acquisition, which came our way, and we've been able to integrate and build it forward. And therefore, we have now several iconic brands in our portfolio, like 3 of which I mentioned from the Zydus portfolio, and the ones like Complan, Glucon-D, and Nycil that came in from the Heinz portfolio.
So take us through that acquisition you mentioned, because Heinz was a milestone, so to speak, for Zydus. You acquired them in 2018. Why did you zero in on Heinz specifically?
So let me just go back 2015 and then build it from there. So 2015, when I came on board, I think what we agreed was a three-pillar strategy of, first of all, reviving our organic growths, because this is a company where most of the brands are market leaders. So we are focused on category development, and therefore our focus was to build our brands organically using innovation, strong sales and marketing. Because being market leaders, we also have a good pricing power. We were a profitable business. So we said, let's build this forward, and surely from a growth rate of close to about 3% that we were doing in 2014-15 to about 2018, the growth rates went into double digits by strong distribution expansion that we did 2.5 times, innovations and several other initiatives. So that was one pillar. Second pillar was to take it to, we had a capability in these categories, some of which was as good as global, knowledge on these cost-wise advantage. So we started putting that together. And the third leg, which was the most crucial one, was that we were generating a fair amount of cash, and we said, look, we can do this business model at a much larger scale, and that's where the role of an acquisition will fall in.
It made sense for the company.
Yes, and therefore we put a structured effort in 2015 onwards to make it happen. We put a set of target options, and Heinz did come up as one of the things that we looked at. The fundamentals being that there were two things which very similar to what Zydus Wellness stood for. Both came from original innovations by a pharma company into consumer space. So they were scientific, they were do good for the consumers, and they were category builders. So whether you look at Glucon-D, which is close to 59-60%, or a sugar-free at 95%, they are clearly category builders. So therefore, they were commonality in the way we looked at it. The distribution was again grocers, chemists, and of course the newer channels. So there were a fair level of similarity. Of course, we looked at several other things. We did study, did due diligence with other options also, but this was clearly one of the targets we had kept. And when it came up, I think we reached out and we worked on it. And I think we found synergy both at the front end as well as the organizationally, and in terms of where these brands could take us. So that's really where.
Okay, we'll get to those synergies in just a bit, but Nishit, Ernst & Young worked very closely with Zydus Wellness in this transformation journey. If we deep dive into this particular acquisition with Heinz, what are some of the key priorities companies must keep in mind that play to their advantage?
Right. So Ritu, if we see in today's day and age, there are a plethora of digital brands, and even before the advent of digital brands, a plethora of brands which have been really populating this space, and more so in the personal care space. And all of these brands are vying for the same share of shelf, the consumer mind space, as well as the share of consumer's wallet, right? So to try and drive growth, building these brands and acquiring a loyal consumer base is extremely time consuming and resource intensive. Therefore, as a key priority for an acquisition, identifying strong brands which have a very loyal consumer base, have a strong pull in the category, really becomes the first consideration for any kind of an acquisition. The kind of synergies that you can get, be it across the entire value chain, right from sourcing to manufacturing and distribution, is just, to my mind, the icing on the cake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Nishit and Tarun, hold your thoughts. We have to take a very short break, but don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to this episode of Transformation Realized, powered by EY, where we're tracking the transformation journey of Zydus Wellness. Tarun, let me come back to you again on this huge acquisition that you made, because it was a big deal. Heinz was almost twice your size. So what were some of the challenges that you faced during this acquisition, and how did you manage to make it a smooth process?
When we acquired Kraft Heinz, we did realize that it was 2 times our size, but one strong thing that we did realize, we were asked, can you really, is Zydus Wellness equipped to consummate? Yeah, absolutely. Acquisition of this size. I think I go back to, as I was explaining, 2015 onwards, we were preparing for a much larger play in a consumer health business, consumer and personal care business. And we clearly believed that we were not building capabilities only for what business we had, but what business we wanted to. Okay. And we were clear that through innovations, through acquisitions, we will get there. So clearly, one thing that worked in our favor at that point in time, even when what we went through, I'll talk about it, but one thing that really worked in our favor was we invested on people capability and capacity, which was not just for where we were, but where we wanted to be. And that came in handy because when we were together, the teams, we could actually, bring value to the business. Some of the investments, for example, and I'll give a specific example in terms of 2 parts. One was distribution. So, in fact, at half the size of the business, our direct distribution reach were almost similar, 2.5 lakh outlets directly. And what we could build together was much larger on that. Similarly, the pieces which Nishit and his team worked on, the back-end supply chain. So we had a very similar kind of infrastructure on warehousing, because there are usual suspects. If you want to be in Rajasthan, Jaipur would tend to be a similar C&F and very similar kind of infrastructure. So we could work on, getting the best of both the worlds together on those kind of things. So therefore, while it looked very daunting at that time because of scale, but actually, because we were clear what were we seeking out of that and how we could add value to that business, I think it worked out reasonably well. The other piece which I mentioned a little bit about people part, I think we focused on the fact that, people are the critical resource of any organization. So in the integration journey, we first focused on ensuring that we took care of people and assured them that this business was not about one versus the other, but about building the brands and the businesses together. And therefore, while we've actually done some synergy benefits in terms of reduction in people, we didn't do it by asking a lot of people to go, but we looked at use the natural attrition and redeployment as a way to get there. So therefore, our approach was quite positive in that sense that we did.
I think people is the recurring theme we hear when we talk about transformation of companies, without exceptions. But Nishit, let me come to you on that note, because how did you ensure from an EY point of view that they were able to realize these synergies that they were targeting, and especially around the quick wins that you could get?
I think there were two areas that we picked up. One, of course, was procurement. And we largely focused on direct material, raw materials, and packaging material, where one, there was, especially on the packaging material side, there was some commonality. So, some clear quick wins of getting economies of scale by merging the two organizations, having two supplier bases, identifying the best suppliers within those. But actually, the team went a lot deeper and again took that same first principle approach. We did a market price discovery. We understood what are the kind of prices in the market, which now with this larger scale, the organization could try and target the right profile of suppliers that we could reach out to. And even with these new suppliers, we actually helped create the right cost sheet models, which could clearly call out what were the kind of underlying commodity prices that were linked to each of these packaging materials that Zydus Wellness was buying.
Okay, so whether it comes to these identification of clusters or reducing the cost on packaging, because of your clear focus on that, once these quick wins were realized, Tarun, what were the next set of priorities?
We did realize that quick wins were important, and like he said, but more long-term, they were the big ones, which were more long-term, were in terms of manufacturing footprint, which we had to really relook at and needed a lot of effort. There were digitization of supply chains, relooking at some of our processes, which needed a more detailed work, which is where we had Nishit's team come back and relook at some of our supply chain processes, both in terms of demand management, replenishment, pull-based system. So some of those were clearly identified and we followed through.
Okay, so once this acquisition was done, to ensure that there is sustainable value creation, what did EY, according to you, think were the steps and strategies that had to be implemented?
So Ritu, there were two clear areas for us to focus on once the quick wins were out of the way. First was on the manufacturing side, and the second was on the supply chain planning side. So on the manufacturing side, like I was mentioning earlier, the first conversation I'd had with Tarun, I think somewhere at the back of his mind, if you recollect, you always have this view that there is some scope for consolidation of your manufacturing footprint, and that is definitely going to lead to significant savings for the organization. But rather than just trying to optimize on only the manufacturing cost or only on the distribution and warehousing cost or the inventory cost, so to speak, the entire approach in our case was that we looked at all of these costs put together on manufacturing, distribution, inventory, and warehousing, and balanced it against the need for the organization to be a lot closer to the end demand point, a lot closer to be able to respond to the end consumer, not just in terms of distance, but also in terms of lesser and leaner inventory across the organization to be able to, have different promotions, etc., depending on how competition is working. So that was the first piece that we did. And the interesting thing was that we were able to actually consolidate the number of manufacturing locations, at the same time get closer to the, so the actual distance between make to deliver has actually reduced for the organization. The second area was more on the planning side, and this is a lot more driven by the process part of it. So when we came in, there were two different organizations having their own governance processes, both pulling in slightly different directions, having different KPIs. I remember those initial meetings where, Tarun was collating, anchoring these meetings, and, the KPIs are very different across the both organizations. So just people getting to the same definition of what success was and what we should be tracking was a bit of a challenge.
It was not more revenue, more profits? No.
That's always the case, but
how to, and therefore what are the input metrics to really look at?
I see.
Right. Of course, everything boils down to that. But catching a dispatch planner and telling him what he needs to do versus a warehouse
or to hold different people accountable. I think
Right.
one of the things, and I'll just build from there. I think one thing we realized, and I've talked about it, that for us, really the big win will be if we get our growth right. This was a business that we acquired was not growing. And we just managed to get some better growths in the Zydus. So we clearly realized that we are in a consumer business. We had to get growths and get growths by innovating, being close to the consumer, like he was explaining, and having a better distribution, better customer service. Now, if you are going to invest behind the brands, if we have to innovate, we have to do these things, we needed a backend which is going to make that, enable that. And therefore, backend was not just about cost cutting. Of course, there were costs to be taken out, but our processes which were future ready, which were close to the customer, so that I was able to, with the increased complexity, able to reach out to consumer with far better efficiency. And therefore, we are more future ready. And therefore, it was not like two separate streams working, but a one well-oiled machinery which was ready to build the organization the way it wanted to.
Actually, that is my next question on the value you realized at the back end of the value chain. How did you go about the process? What were some of the learnings?
So there was something at the same cost, actually not even at the same cost, but a lower cost to serve. We were able to more than double, 2.5 times our distribution at 1% lower cost to serve. Similarly, as Nishit was explaining, as we moved back in the supply chain, there were clearly cost savings in terms of when we integrated the entire warehousing infrastructure, which made it simpler and at a much substantially lower cost. What it did was that I was able to hold less, I was able to reduce the inventory while being more available for the customer when he or she needed it. And then again, at the packaging level, we got about 8 to 12% kind of savings. So across the value chain, we just went through and we found there was opportunity to improve our efficiency, improve our service, improve KPIs that mattered for that part of that value chain, and also take out costs while doing that.
I think we've deep dived into sort of the micro issues of this transformation journey. We had to take a bigger picture, bird's eye view as well, which we'll do after this very short break. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to this episode of Transformation Realized, powered by EY, where we're talking about Zydus's transformation journey. And Tarun, we can't really talk about your journey without taking a look at the environment in which you were operating. In the last few years, whether it's been COVID, the global supply chain disruption, there's been enough and more headwinds for businesses, and FMCG was no exception. How did Zydus, navigate through these difficult times?
So I think since I've joined, I've had a series of disruptions. So I think we started building our business, and in 2016, demonetization happened. And as we started coming out of it, while it was a short disruption, it affects your entire.
Yeah.
Then there was GST, and then it took away a month or two, and that straight away takes away a certain thing. Then came this whole acquisition, integration, and then we thought we were done. In fact, one of my favorite stories about this is the fact that after we did one of the fastest integration in a consumer space of this size, I think we had the business with us from January 19, 30th January 19. And by end of the year, by 31st December, we had pretty much completed most of the key integration things: people, distribution, warehousing, backend, practically the whole of things. 2 or 3 months later, we were so badly hit like everyone else with this pandemic. So one of the questions I used to think about at that point in time, why us and why this time? We miss an opportunity. But I actually reflect back and I really think about if we had not done the integration, we're not focused on synergies the way we did. A lot of organizations went through a pain. A lot of them had to redo their whole organization structure, let go of people, cut costs. We had done all that. So fortunately, we were better prepared for what we went through.
Well, so, in this new world order, how are supply chains really reinventing themselves?
So we're seeing organizations do get much closer to the end consumer. So they are, doing far better AI/ML models to actually be able to better predict demand. But of course, that also goes only so far. And therefore, also having the right processes in place to be able to catch the early warning signals which may be coming from a retailer end, from an end consumer perspective, and feed them back into the supply chain. So that's the first key trend. The second one is having far better visibility of the supply chain, and that definition itself has changed, because now it's no longer about visibility of what's happening within your organization, but a visibility of what's happening within your suppliers, within your suppliers, and therefore being able to piece all of this information together, have a single source of truth, and on the back of that be able to take your key decisions. The third aspect that is happening is that the entire principle of supply chain and this control tower is shifting to a predictive model rather than a reactive model. It's no longer about saying, let's review what happened last month. It's all about saying that I could have a potential stock out 10 days later. What is the thing that I have to do right now? What are the key steps that each of my 5 people in the supply chain team has to take to be able to avoid that stock out? And lastly, what organizations are also seeing is to be able to drive all of this, there is a need to have the right set of tools, solutions, the right data scientists to be able to support it. And a lot of organizations, where I mentioned earlier, right, for an FMCG company, the key focus is brand building, is customer acquisition, driving products in the market. So a lot of organizations are saying, this is not really a core it is critical for me, but it is not something where I'll be able to retain these kind of people or build this kind of technological capability, because digital is ramping up that well. Therefore, organizations are saying, I'm better off having the right partner who can actually manage it and run it for me on a day-to-day basis like a managed service, and gives me the key insights. So I still own as an organization, as a CEO, I still own the key decisions, but I'm not bothering myself with ensuring that all the groundwork which is leading up to that decision is also my baby.
Okay, Nishit, before we wrap, I have one ask of you, and this is for all the industry people watching, for our viewers. If you were to summarize this transformation journey, what would be some of the 2 or 3 key learnings for people to take away?
Ritu, if I reflect back on the entire journey over the last 3.5 years, I think the one thing that really stood out for me was the fact that Tarun and the leadership team were very clear right from the start of the acquisition, in fact, just before that, of what were the key reasons why they were doing the acquisition, what is the kind of value that they were looking to unlock from it, the key initiatives that they wanted to drive. The second element was, the openness to ask for help. And identifying point experts who've done these jobs multiple times before, to be able to bring them on board and ensure that they work jointly well with the team to drive it and get it right first time. Lastly, I think the entire people agenda, so which Tarun, to my mind, anchored himself, right, rather than handing it to anyone, which was all about ensuring that all people in the organization were very transparently brought on board to this entire set of objectives. I think there were town halls that you were conducting, be it the consulting team or the internal stakeholders. Everyone was actually acutely aware of the need, the key outcomes that were expected, and therefore all through the entire journey, we were able to get the full support of the team, and that, to my mind, made all the difference.
Okay, so to have clarity of thought as to why you're taking the decision you're taking, to be able to delegate when you know somebody else has a better expertise, and of course, like you said, people management is at the center of all of this. Thank you for those fabulous key takeaways, and I hope the industry has a lot more to take away from this interview as well. Nishit and Tarun, thank you for your time. With that, we have to wrap up. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a peek into the transformation journey of Zydus Wellness.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of our show, Transformation Realized, powered by EY, a 6-part series where we will bring you inspiring stories of business transformation realized through the power of people, technology, and innovation. So stay tuned to CNBC-TV18 for more.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.